Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Friday, the 5th of March, comes to you from London. And quite a lot going on in the markets. So a big sell-off again in the US last night. And the key thing I'm just looking at this morning, first off, is crude. Brent crude making new highs. So pushing higher yesterday and today, making new highs. And wandering into long-term bull trends. So that's quite interesting. We're seeing commodities picking up. And that's all part of the super cycle. You tend to see the bond market start to collapse first, which means yields going up, then equities sometime later, then commodities rocket whilst that's all happening, and then last of all is precious metals. So those are the big super cycles, if you like, and it's just interesting to see commodities generally just picking up now. So that's the first observation, but we'll take a whole look at the energy mix towards the end of the video. So we start by looking at the dollar. Dollar's strong, and that's normally a bad thing for commodities, but we're seeing that short-term move looking increasingly like a bottom. Notice how we've made the higher high, so that's really significant. And it does look like the dollar is now undergoing a turnaround for the first time in a while. We are just pushing through on the cloud, and if we look at the chart going back a longer period, we haven't been above the cloud. We had a lot of volatility last year, but we haven't been above the cloud now for a good couple of years. So this is really the first signs that we're starting to see that recovery, the higher high being very significant there. So the dollar is short-term bullish, medium-term turning bullish, but still the long-term chart is bearish, has a lot more work to do in the long term. That means that the euro is falling against that stronger dollar. We're seeing fall through the 120 level. Short-term bearish. We've got downside targets to 115. Keep an eye on those point and figure targets. And again, breaking lower, taking out that February low. So that is significant. And the dollar against the yen, for the first time in ages, is just rocketing there, and it tends to be a bit of a lead indicator, the yen. We were through on the daily quite a while ago, so the key thing is here that we are seeing that that dollar really starting to move, so above 108 for the first time. That stronger dollar is meaning that sterling is falling back, so we're seeing weaker sterling, so that's quite key. And the euro sterling is still looking relatively strong. It's sitting at 116, targets to 120 and into the 130s ultimately. 116.86 has been the target that we've been watching since December, and so that's very much in place. Taking a look at Bitcoin, falling back quite sharply through the $50,000 mark, so back into the 40s. So short-term bearish, we've got downside potential of around 5%. So if you're trading Bitcoin, keep an eye on the 1 minute chart. And if we look at the S&P 500 index, it was down 1.3% yesterday, so that's quite key. And then the NASDAQ falling even more sharply. We did see a little bit of a bounce in the S&P at the end there, and the same in the NASDAQ. We were really going to sort of capitulation mode. We see the candle there, that sort of tail on the candle. So we did recover a little bit at the end, but the reality is we are seeing the NASDAQ just now starting to fall away. So that is a really significant development that is occurring on Wall Street. 10% downside still on these targets, so that's quite key. We've got a bit of a tussle going on now with the targets, which will win, the long-term upside targets or the short-term downside. So, but we are seeing multiple targets to the downside. Short term, a further 3 or 4% downside, so that may play out the next week or so. Looking at the futures, we're down further this morning, so sentiment really taking a knock here, and the Nasdaq E-mini down 0.75%. So again, US markets set to open lower, so that's a bad week for US stocks basically. The VIX volatility is up 3%. Nudging the we were above 30 yesterday, the first time we've been above 30 for a good while actually, and it looks like we're sort of holding that short-term bullish mark. So the level to watch, of course, is this 37 mark. We've got a target to 52. That's very high for the VIX. So the fear index is just short-term bullish at the moment. So the market's actually taken a real knock sentiment-wise in the last few days. The FTSE futures down 1.3% this morning. The DAX in Germany is down just over 1%, and the CAC 40 is down just over 1% as well. So we're seeing on the whole, Europe selling off the back of the US. The one market bucking the trend is the Japanese market. Weaker yen is helping stocks there, but that's the only market really. The Hang Seng down 0.47%. Strong numbers out from China on the economic growth side has kept their falls just very, very slight. And looking at the Sensex, we're down just under 1%. So we're seeing this rout really across the board. Aussie market down 0.75%. So these markets now closed for the week. It will be interesting to see how the US finishes the day. Looking at gold, this has been another worry where for gold bulls, we've broken that 1700 level. We've got one target to 1676. That was the short-term target given back in November. You just can't ignore these targets. We've got some medium-term targets. The main thing is that we don't break below this low that we saw in September time, which has given us a big upside target. So it'll be interesting to see, but for the moment we are seeing gold short-term bearish, medium-term bearish, and the long-term chart just entering that bearish territory, but still the trend is up. And we saw how the price went below the cloud in 2018 before recovering, so it's a bit early to call the long-term trend over. Silver is actually looking weak again, short-term bearish below the cloud. We've got further 3% downside. The medium-term chart is actually holding on, and the long-term chart we still are in a clear uptrend. So that's looking a bit stronger than gold. Copper demand increases. We've seen big moves in steel, copper, nickel this week. Commodities all starting to move, so that's quite significant. But the short-term chart is bearish, and of course the big story this week has been bond prices. So US 10-year yield sitting at 1.55%, holding on to those gains. Basically, we are wandering out the long-term trend here, so it's looking like bond prices are really set to move higher. We've got a target now on the long-term bond price. That step back this week has given us a new target to 3.26%. That would, if we went to that level, that would be a turnaround of multi-decades in the bond market. So that's very significant. Looking at the 30-year bond, much the same. We've got upside targets here as well that have been met, and so that's quite significant too. Taking a quick look at the energy mix now. We mentioned that Brent Crude was making new highs, up 1.5% this morning. So that's very significant. Again, taking out that high, we've got upside targets 69.20 and 68.80. Brent Crude the same. US nat gas sitting at 272, so pretty much stuck in the doldrums there. Our most bullish call for the week was actually coal, and on the coal chart we were bullish in the short term. There's a shortage of upside targets in the long term, where we were down yesterday, but we are seeing this morning we're back up again. So coal, there's a little bit of volatility there. We've got a new upside target on the long-term chart. That's the first real long-term target we've seen, but at the moment it's this 72 level that we're watching. We just hit the 70 level yesterday and just struggled to break through that. Emissions markets. We put out a report this week to clients on emissions. So of course we're long-term bullish on emissions, but for the moment we are just stuck a little bit in the doldrums. Wait for the next break out of that range. Gas markets up this morning, but we're generally bearish on gas. We're seeing these multiple downside targets. We've seen a little bit of a relief rally here. On your OTC data, keep an eye on the 1 minute charts. If we look at TTF, we're bearish below 17 on Dutch gas. And if we look at German power, we see here that we are slightly down this morning, still very much stuck in this range. That's it for today. Until Monday, have a great weekend. Happy charting. See you then.